Glad has been gracious to sponsor this meetup for like the next couple of months. So definitely appreciate them. And obviously everyone here probably knows about Glide. Just check them out. And I think last month we had one of the head of content from Glide to speak. So I'm hoping to get some more speakers from Glide to come talk because they're helping sponsor this meetup. So the agenda, I feel like this agenda just gets longer and longer every time. Quick intros again, do the usual no code news and updates, talk a little bit about co-working day, the LinkedIn group, volunteers. Erik is going to talk about his experience working with no code tools. He used to work at Bubble and he's going to do a nice kind of overview of the no code industry and space. Victor, who is a friend of Omar here, he's going to talk about Construct 3. I've never heard of it until yesterday. It's a no code game builder. And then just a quick note about our sponsor. Yeah. So seen this slide. If you come here, I'm Al. I'm a Associate Architect at Coda. Erik, who you've seen here, he's here in person today, Developer Community Lead at Prismic. And then John Mello, he's not here today, App Builder and Bubble Coach. So the news and updates for this meetup going to be pretty quick because we have a few speakers. So No Code Ops Conference, just learned about this literally 2 weeks ago. It's happening in Atlanta. It's probably the biggest no code conference on the East Coast. Philip, who's the organizer, actually happens to be Erik's childhood friend, yeah. I believe. So really cool guy. And we got in touch with him because we're thinking of putting on our own conference in New York at some point. And so trying to figure out what their best practices are. But if you haven't checked it out yet, I think it's a mix of an online plus in-person conference. Is that right? Details are still forthcoming, but yeah, they have like all the big name no code companies coming to this event in September this year. So check it out. If you can make a trip out to Atlanta, great. If not, you can do all the virtual stuff. So no code ops conf. And from talking to Philip, the focus of this conference is not like kind of entrepreneurs and indie hackers who are building stuff. It's actually mostly people that are working at companies, big companies, are using no code tools in their company. So I think in LinkedIn, I see the term citizen developer used a lot. I think that's the kind of audience that they're targeting for this conference. And yeah, really, really cool line of speakers and all that kind of stuff. So I think, again, the agenda is still coming out. Just sign up for it on their website and you'll get all the details when they come out. One thing that came up in the last few weeks that I thought was interesting was Zapier has like this early access list of all their new beta products. And one that I thought was interesting is this thing called Tables. I haven't played around with it at all. I just joined for the early access. But essentially you have like a structured table in Zapier to store data that's coming from your zaps. And you can also take action from the rows, I think, and do zaps from each row. So I think it's kind of like their way of like, taking stuff out of Google Sheets and other tools that have tables in them and moving them to their own platform and having a native table, structured table product. Essentially a database in Zapier instead of like using Google Sheets or something else like that. Has anyone played around with this or has had early access? Guessing not. Super new. Yeah, no, I think it's just them trying to put more stuff into their Zapier ecosystem versus like having to use Google Sheets and their database tools.
Is it then that's still around? They were their biggest competitor. They are?
Yeah,
but they've moved more into hardware.
Yeah,
so you have like security cameras, you have monitors or anything.
I don't know what I was thinking about them today. I don't know. They're like, man, these guys still around? Because I know that was just like, cool.
Yeah. And I think that's actually all the updates I had. I pretty light on the news this time around. I guess I'll go into the other kind of housekeeping stuff. So I think I mentioned this. You might have seen this on the meetup. 2 weeks ago, we had our first co-working day. I think like 2 people showed up. I know it's still relatively new. It's just here. It's $20 a day. Again, Glide is actually sponsoring 5 spots. So if you want to do free co-working, it's probably going to be in 2 weeks on a Thursday. And it's going to be on this floor. We'll have a little group table for people that want to co-work together. And it's 5 spots for free. So just keep a lookout for a sign up form I'll send out after today. And yeah, great community. Also, there's a nice happy hour here afterwards on Thursdays. So we can work together and then get drinks. Hopefully you can work on projects together and just learn from each other. So 5 free spots, otherwise it's $20. LinkedIn group, I think I mentioned this last time. We're trying to slowly move people from the meetup group to LinkedIn. It's very slow, but check out this LinkedIn group, or hopefully make this a more active place for people in the New York City no code community. And call for volunteers, of course. Me and Eric and John, we've been the ones kind of running this meetup, and always happy to have new folks join. And with that, I'll leave it to Erik Israni. He's going to talk more about his experience with no code.
What's going on, everybody? It's been a little while since I've been in front of a room. This is fun. Yeah, so I'm Eric. Right now, I'm working at a company called Prismic. It's a headless CMS. We're moving into a low-code space, so it's great because I get to keep my connection here with the no-code folks. Previously, I was at Bubble, so if you ever got an email from an Eric at Bubble, almost guaranteed it was me. I ran their community for a long time. I launched their ambassador program. I launched their education boot camps. I had the meetup series that was going for a while here in New York, all pre-pandemic. And I don't know if you've attended one of the breakfasts that we ran, or the build days, or the hackathon, etc. I'm happy to answer any questions about my time there as well, if you like. But yeah, so it's just a little bit about me. Today, I just want to do a quick chat. I'm playing with some concepts around how to explain no-code platforms to folks. And so quick show of hands, how many of you are relatively new to no-code? Okay, so about half the room. So I'm gonna chat as though you're relatively new, but also I will take it from a perspective of folks who maybe have some experience with no-code, and now you're trying to pitch yourself. You pitch your software to others, right? And I'm drawing on my experience working with Bubble primarily, and now with Prismic, where folks are coming up to me and asking me, is this the right software for me, right? And that works both as someone who's selling the software, but also someone who's trying to evaluate, is this the right no-code product for me? And so the 3 primary questions I get, I've kind of bucketed them for you here, revolve around a bit of skepticism, a bit of inspiration, and a bit of specialization. And so the skepticism is, can this do what you say it does, right? Bubble especially, there was a lot of skepticism. There continues to be a bunch of skepticism because they claim to be tremendously robust. And so can this actually do that, right? And you see all of these companies that are launching new ways of building with their products. You know, I'll just mention Zapier putting a table, right? New table product out. How does that compare to, say, an Airtable or Google Sheets? Can it do what you need it to do, right? So there's a tremendous amount of skepticism in the market, and you have to address that, right? Inspiration. I have found the most successful way for folks to identify with a product has been showing other people being successful with that product. Normally they have a project in mind. Each and every one of you, when you went to look for a no-code product, you had a project in mind that you're trying to build. And so if you find someone who's done something similar to you, it makes it a whole lot easier for you to be like, okay, this might be the right one for me. If you don't see anything that reminds you of what you're trying to build, it's probably not a good fit. And then specialization. For some folks, you're going to find there is a specific thing they need done, whether it be a specific integration they need, a specific workflow they have to build for, a specific data set they have to be able to build. And if you can't do that, it's a big problem. Or if you can't find a way to do that, you need to move on. And so for me, whenever I'm explaining how does this all work in the most simplest terms, and I want this to be a bit of a conversation. If this doesn't resonate with you, if you feel like this misses the mark or missing anything huge, let me know. Raise your hand. We can chat about it. But honestly, almost all no-code tools are broken into 3 categories, right? There's the front end, the piece that gets presented to your users, right? What they interact with. The back end, where all the information, all the data is stored, organized, sorted. And then there's the workflows and the APIs, right? And for me, those are very similar. The workflows basically are what happens internally. What is the action that gets taken? The APIs are those actions get taken with data, a backend that you don't own, you don't control. It's someplace else. Or maybe you do control it, but it's separate from the one you're working with. And so how do those all work together? You do something on the front end, that affects the back end, and it gets done with the workflow. So, anyone have any questions? Did I miss anything? Is there anything about this structure that you think I should be talking about? No, I'm just going to keep chatting. Then. So, when we're looking at the field right now, what's out there in terms of no code, and we have to ask yourself is when you're choosing, do I want something that's fully integrated, that has everything I need in one place, right? Bubble, Coda, Webflow, these are standalone products that typically you don't need to integrate with anything else. You can get everything you need out of these products and produce something. You could build an entire business on these products alone. But then you have ones that are unbundled. They require other products to go with them. They require other services, right? Softer, you have to match that with an Airtable if you want to do anything remotely, honestly, interesting. Right? Otherwise, it's just like a basic front end. It's not great. WordPress, for those of you who are experienced with that, you have to rely on a ton of plugins, right, just to get someplace. And for all of those who have tried WordPress, there are definitely better options for you now if you're trying to build anything fancy. And the same thing with Shopify. Shopify is still the e-commerce go-to, but again, requires that you, if you're not going to code anything yourself, use a ton of other plugins, rely on other pieces in order to do anything. And what you see a lot of times is people will pair another platform with Shopify, and Shopify will just do the e-commerce section of it. So you got to ask yourself, do I want to manage multiple subscriptions to really customize, or do I want to try and build everything in one? And so I only have to yell at one company when things go wrong, right? So it's that balancing act. And it's tough, right? Because as you see some companies, they really lean into what they're doing, right? Zapier, for instance, every day they're adding new integrations, new possibilities. They're growing at a tremendous speed because they're not building anything else. That's fantastic. But if you have someone like Bubble, right, they have to rely on building new things for their current experience, right? They just spent a tremendous amount of time and a big chunk of that 100 million they just raised, refactoring and rebuilding their editor and their responsive editor, right? So does everyone know what I mean when I say responsive? Does anyone not know? Let's start that. Everyone can close their eyes. You don't have to be ashamed. It's basically the experience for mobile, right? Depending on the screen size, your front end, what your user sees will respond to the size of the screen without jumbling everything up, without looking terrible. So there's decisions you have to make. The other things that we want people to consider when they're thinking about this is scalability. I get this question all the time. Does this scale? When do I have to move off of this, right? And more, that's less of a problem. But for a lot of companies, it becomes a serious problem. The two places in which I see most people running into a wall are, one, the amount of workflows you're trying to run. If you're trying to process a ton of data at once, you're going to run into some issues. And the other one is the sheer amount of data you are trying to hold on to. A lot of places will put limits on that, and you'll literally break it because you have too much in there. So you have to think carefully about that. If you're going to have enormous data sets, the unbundled option might be the best one for you, because then you can customize how big that database is going to be without running into the limits and trying to figure out which plan is going to match my desired outcome. Security. This is a big one. Most times you will fall down on security because you haven't set it up properly. Every single platform has some kind of security baked into it. So take that into consideration, and also recognize that there are some of them that will tell you your business is not welcome here because we don't have enough security to meet those needs. Top of mind are anything healthcare related. If you're trying to build something for the healthcare market, you have to match the HIPAA laws, right? You have to fall into those regulations. You're not going to have a whole lot of luck. Same thing with finance, right? And so an unbundled option might be the best for that, because you can send the data to a place where it can get stored, where it can be controlled, where it is secure, right? With a platform that takes on the risk, has all the certifications, has everything you need, and then only brings it out when you need to have your user interact with it. And the last one's survival. These companies are popping up all over the place. You got to judge for yourself if you think they're going to be around next week, next month, right? In 6 months. Not only that, do they have any kind of pledge where you'll get your data if they go under, if they go down, right? The difference between no code and traditional code is that you don't really control a tremendous amount of this, right? And so if they go under, if they have problems, if they're down, what have you, that's the ball game potentially. So you got to ask yourself, are these guys surviving? And then to a secondary note is, are you backing up your information? Can you? How easily can you? So these are all the considerations that I go to, both with pitching a project, right? I built a bubble project. I built something with Webflow, what have you. I'm like, hey, this is what I want to build for you. These are the tools I want to have, but also as a consumer of these tools, how is this going to fit? Is this going to meet my needs? And that's it. So if this was confusing, let me know. I'm refining this pitch for, just to kind of work on this as I speak with others who are less sophisticated as yourselves, working with some students and whatnot. And so you're a bit of my test group here. So let me know what was confusing, what wasn't. If you want to ask about my time at Bubble, I'll share all the secrets. And I've been there for 3 years, so tell you what I can. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, right there. Yeah.
Comment, I thought it was fantastic.
Thank you.
Dove into a lot of different areas of no code. I think one thing that could make it stronger is upfront including more examples of what these platforms actually help people doing.
Sure.
That way, like, for me, it made sense. I do run no code.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody else who does less, they might not have any.
Oh, yeah.
What look like, look like.
Absolutely. Yeah. So diving into those kinds of examples for sure, making them clear. You guys got the truncated, very clean version, but I appreciate that's finding good examples is going to be super important. Thank you. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I had Matt and I, before the talk, we were talking about some of the limitations of other, like, for example, I can provide you with an MVP version of that, but if you want to go very complex, you'll have to start from things all. There's no like extension. We talk like all this, I believe 6 different things provided. The extensibility of.
Sure. So yeah, extensibility is super important for something as complex as building, let's say, an Uber, right? So there are like Bubble itself has a plugin market, right? So they have a plugin market. So they have a marketplace where you can go and find plugins to do things that the Bubble itself isn't prepared to do, right? It isn't built to do. For a lot of these though, they don't have that same extensibility. So if it's not part of the platform, you have to build something like it, right? And so I can't speak specifically to that example because I don't know if anyone has built a ride share plugin for Bubble, but I do know that there are folks who are sending the information out, and they use API. They'll find someone who will sort that information and then serve it back up, right? So for that particular example, if you can find a third-party service who will help you in terms of whatever you're trying to build, what feature you're trying to build, like track the car, right? Sending updated information as to where it is, because they have a map function. And so you would just be updating the position on the map, right? You could definitely do that. In terms of the booking, you could absolutely do bookings with Bubble. The credit card information, you'd have to plug in something like a Stripe, right? Building a shopping cart for, I don't think you know of any no-code tools that have shopping cart? No, you'd have to go with a third. And that goes back to my point about finance, right? If you're taking credit cards, if you're taking any kind of personally identifiable information, PII, then you have to be very careful with how you store it. And that's why, honestly, you probably want to send it to somebody else and let them deal with it. But yeah.
But it sounds like with the plugin,
Yeah, for sure. And I ran into someone a couple of years ago where they take the information in. This was before the new AI models and everything like that. They would take the information and they would send it to a company, and that company would, not nearly as quickly, but they would manipulate the information and spit out copy and images based on the prompts. So he wouldn't do it within his no-code platform. He'd take the prompt, he'd send it over, and then you get something back with all of those new, pieces of content done for you, right? So he built the front end, he built, the relationship with the client, he built the business, but he wasn't actually doing the manipulation of the data, right? And to that end, something else to consider is when you're choosing, bundled versus unbundled, right? That might be, that's a key for an unbundled approach. But with the workflows and APIs, you have companies like Zapier, which seems like everyone's familiar with. We've mentioned if then that, or if this then that. And there's another one, they just changed the name. They were Integramat, and now they're Make. I think they're Make.com. They're another one. And then there was one, I haven't checked in with them lately. I wonder if they're still around. There was another one. Trying to remember their name, huh? That's not the one I'm thinking of, but they would take in the information, but within the tool, you could manipulate it. So you could parse it, you could rearrange it, you could clean it up, you could do all of your data work within their tool, and then send it to whatever endpoint you wanted for them to go do the work and then send it back to your front end. Right? Does everyone understand what I'm talking about when I say that though? That's a kind of a complex concept to visualize. But if anyone, I'm happy to dig in further if anyone has any questions. But yeah, so to your point, I don't think anyone natively could build Uber, but you could get there with the right API to the right, organization that'll help you manage that data. Yeah, although my demonstration used to be building Twitter, so if anyone wants to dethrone Elon, please, it's not that difficult. It's just a lot of data you have to handle.
I mean, like a video of that, like a time lapse of you building that. That would be awesome.
I did it all in 45 minutes, and my hook was, in the first 15, 20 minutes, I'd build it, and then I'd put a QR code up, and I'd have them, scan it, and it'd show up on their phones, and then their tweets would show up on the screen as I'm teaching, and like adding features and stuff.
Which platform did you build that in?
Bubble. That was my go-to Bubble demo. It was that or Instagram. I'd be like, can I take a picture of yourself and toss it up there? And we'd roast them a little bit, But yeah, depending on the group. So any other questions? You had one.
So when you're at Bubble, actually just for everyone here, like one thing more selfishly for me is you have all these big companies and all these platforms are coming up, and all it takes is one person at the company to say, I want to build something in Bubble at Nike or NBC.
Mhm.
How do you convince that person's coworkers and colleagues to get on board with using that platform? Because everyone's so used to using
Sure.
Excel, Sheets,
Yeah.
whatever crappy CMS is being used
Yeah.
internally. But now all these tools, all it takes is one person to take a risk to use a Bubble, to use Webflow. How did you work with
Sure.
like companies that were like
Yeah.
moving to Bubble?
Yeah. So for Bubble specifically, that one, we dealt mostly, and I think they still deal mostly with entrepreneurs. So they were the decision maker. There were very few internal tools that were being built by someone who wasn't in charge. But I do have some insight into this. So if you do end up going to the no-code conf, that's literally what that's all about, right? Those are all internal builders who are automating, pitching their projects and whatnot. And so we did have a couple folks come to us. Actually, Phil from his previous job came, and they had to assess the security of it and the capabilities. But from my personal experience, having done this, introducing new tech into your company, right? If you have a reason to use it, if you have a project you're working on, if you have some kind of challenge, these things are so easy. Just build an MVP. Honestly, if you're passionate about, build an MVP, show it off internally, put some demo data in it, and then have them play with it, right? Because more likely than not, they're like, wait a minute, you did this on your free time? You're like, yeah, it took me a couple hours, whatever. And then like, okay, well, can we do this? Can we do this? Can we do this? And then you run it as if you're a bit of a project manager, right? You are the PM for this new project, and they can test and they can play with it, have a little fun with it. Honestly, I think that's the part about these tools that gets maybe, ignored, is that they can be a lot of fun, right? Like I mentioned, I like roasted people a little bit in our demos and stuff. We had some fun, kept it mostly G-rated, but like, this can be play for a lot of people. And so if you're, introducing it to your colleagues, you can have a little fun, build some levity into it. At my new company, I do this a lot where I'm building new things, and I'll swipe my coworkers' names to like name different things, right? Like the so-and-so company, I'll name it after my coworker I'm really trying to win over. I'll use their pictures or whatever as our users in their data and whatnot. That kind of stuff goes a long way to getting it integrated, but also know the product, right? Know what they're going to ask. Or they ask about security. Is it an internal tool? Is it an external tool? If it's client facing, what kind of polish are you going to need on it? Can you achieve that? What are the departments you have to pull in, right? Like one of the reasons that Figma got to be so successful. Are you guys familiar with Figma? Yeah. Was because of that collaborative feature. You could bring in folks without having them sign up, without having them do anything. They'd be like, hey, I built this thing on my own time in Figma. This is how I kind of want it to look. And they'd bring in the designers and they'd be like, oh, this is pretty cool. But they didn't have to commit to it, right? So we're trying to win people over, right? You want to make sure that you can answer their questions. You can have them play with it before you're like, hey, let's do this. I think this is the best option, and like have a whole presentation. It's much better to show than to tell.
I don't think nobody cares about what it's built. It's funny you bring that up, because I kind of got like late last week in a similar situation with a kind of big client. And industry I'm in is real estate, and they do budgeting on spreadsheets. There's no selling up for this. So it's like, no, we're looking, I'm like, all right. So I'm literally building that, taking a flyer on it, but I know this industry really well. I can convince just a few companies that, hey, get off your spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Use this budget management system and allocate credit cards to, your agents.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
My personal favorite business of all time in no code was this super friendly fella from Florida. And I was chatting with him and he's like, yeah, I used to do elevator sales. I'd sell contracts, I'd sell elevators, we do repairs, and I did all the bookings. And it was a terrible antiquated business. So I built a bubble project and automated 99% of the business. And now I service like half of Florida and their elevators, and it's fantastic. And I barely have to do anything. Like, that's pretty awesome. Like, he just walks up, it's all on an iPad. It's just like a checklist and they go through it. And like, he orders the service tickets right from his bubble app, and they all have their own login and they can request stuff or let them know there's a problem. They pay all their bills through that. Fantastic. What a boring business. But this guy lives a dream life now, and he gets to do what he wants, which is spend time with the clients.
Yeah.
So, yeah, incredible. Oh, also super friendly dude. One of the most chill people I got to work with, which was nice. So, any other questions?
I guess I would like to hear about your time at Ball.
Yeah, sure.
What you think now?
Yeah.
So big, I'm sure it's a surprise.
Yeah, so I was employee number 17 at Bubble. So I got on there super early, which was nice. They had their first office space. They're actually, I think they were here first. They're actually in this building for like 6 months to a year. Before that, they were working out of their apartment, just the two of them, two founders, Emmanuel and Josh, a couple other folks, and they got some space here. And then they moved to 900 Broadway, so down the block. They just moved into a new one with the new fundraise. So they raised $100 million shortly after I left. And so, yeah, my time there was great. We grew from 17 to, I want to say, somewhere in the 50s while I was there. And it's like, my hot take is they're still trying to find that product market fit. They haven't yet figured out who their core customer is that they can really hammer on, right? If you ever take a look at their LinkedIn page, their blog, the folks that they are promoting are all over the map, right? They're all different kinds. And that's a really tough sell, right? When me and Emmanuel, the one founder who I reported into, we would get into heated discussions about how to tell the story of Bubble. Like, what are we trying to sell here? And he's like, well, what do you mean? He pushed back all the time. What do you mean? What do you mean? I'm like, well, if we say we do anything you want to everyone, right? My joke was, we can build anything you like as long as it's an app. And I always get like, it gets a chuckle, right? They're like, but like, what does that mean? What do you mean anything, right? And it goes back to my, my initial, buckets, right? These three things. I always had questions about these three things every time. So I had to nail these three things for people. So I'd always have a conversation. What are you trying to build, right? I'm trying to build a marketplace for sneakers, right? Okay, so can we do that? Are other people building marketplaces, two-sided, three-sided marketplaces? And can it do specifically what you need? What do you need, right? High-res photos. Do you need to be able to track shipping? Do you need to be able to, partner with whoever for whatever, right? Can we do those things? So for them, they haven't nailed that yet. Like, if I tell you, like, go to Bubble, they're the #1 company for this, I don't know what that answer is. So, they got a lot of money to spend to try and figure that out. Yeah, go ahead.
It can be a little intimidating. Like, first start off, and you're looking at that nice screen. you're
Yeah.
just thinking about all the constant things.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out how do I execute that.
Sure.
So,
Yeah. And what I'll tell you is this is like between that and the fact that I haven't been on there in a little while, but when the templates were the Wild West. You never quite knew what you were gonna get, right?
I thought someone said something, I'm like, that is the worst
Oh,
advice
it's
ever.
tough. And so what I saw a lot of, and I still see, because I have friends who are making in a six-figure living, doing nothing but taking people who start building in bubble, get overwhelmed, get frustrated, only get so far, relied on a template that went sideways, and then just calling up an agency or a freelancer and be like, can you please, just please. And they do great. They do great with that, right? So,
Do you think Bubble, sorry.
no, go ahead.
Do you think Bubble should change their narrative to saying, hey, like, you're thinking about becoming a developer? Because their pitch is like,
Sure.
I don't think it's true in theory, but
I-
in actuality, no.
I've seen some folks where like, once you understand the, the buckets of development, this is how you develop just about any app, right? These are the very high level considerations for any app. And obviously there's a lot more to go into these things. Each one of these things you understand, right? You break it down. But I've seen folks be like, oh, now I understand how these things work. Now I understand and think like a programmer. Well, now I just have to learn the code that makes it do the thing I want to do, right? So for a lot of folks that was illuminating, it built their confidence up. Do I think that that's their sales pitch? No, I don't think they're like, hey, learn Bubble so you can leave Bubble. That's terrible business, right? And they're not going to start teaching people a framework, right? The next React, whatever. Oh. Any other questions? Any other hot gossip? All right. Well, thank you all. Appreciate your feedback. And yeah, I'll be around if you have more questions later.
Thanks, Eric. All righty. So we don't plan very well here. I literally heard about your friend, Victor, I think yesterday. I think we got the slides like yesterday. So he's gonna be talking about a no-code game builder, which I think is really cool because I've never heard of these platforms before. So I'm just gonna start presenting here. This is the first slide, right? Yeah. Yeah. So Victor, he's going to talk to us more about who he is and stuff he builds in video games.
Is this recording somewhere?
Just the audio and the slides. Yeah.
Oh,
Is that okay? Or...
yeah, it's recording to the slides.
Yeah. So I'll have I'm just gonna have a YouTube video of the slides plus your voice.
Oh, got it.
I can send you the audio.
Oh yeah, I totally want it.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so this is about I wanted to talk about this no-code engine because basically I used it to do something that I didn't think I could do with it, and that was create software that was patented and then sell it to a large company. And so here is my presentation. Okay, so great, awesome. And then so awesome, okay, and great. Okay, so my name is Victor Varnado. I am a New Yorker cartoonist and a comedian and a programmer, and I do a lot of weird stuff. I have a company called Supreme Robot, where I develop a lot of things of different genres, including books, movies, and games and software. And all the games and software I do are with my friend and CTO of all those projects, Omar, who's right here. There he is, everybody, in his Best Buy shirt. I'm just kidding. It's not. All right. Anyway, so yeah, and so I started a project, and I was using Construct 3. Does anybody know Construct 3? Yeah, Construct 3 is like a 2D gaming engine. And the reason that I started this project, actually, I'm just going to go. This is actually not a bad format. ChatGPT had really good ideas. Okay, so we talked about no-code engines before, but I believe it was Eric who said that he really didn't know like gaming engines, or what? No, sorry, it was you who said that, right? Alan.
Yeah.
Alan. Okay. Yeah, there's tons and tons of gaming engines. Obviously, the big ones are like Unity, Unreal, that people know about. But there are also 2D gaming engines like Game Maker and Construct 3, which was originally Construct 2, which is just basically a no to low code engine where they have a lot of behaviors built in or plugins built in specifically for gaming, which is actually why I use it for this project. Okay, so this is what I built in Construct 3. I have a kid that I know, his name is Cavante, he's a quadriplegic. And when I knew him, he would have kids come over to his house to play video games so that he could watch. And then I became obsessed with the idea that Cavante should have a game where he can play it himself. And I started looking at accessibility hardware and software that was available, and it was mostly pretty crappy. And then so what I did with Construct 3, well, I tried to figure out like, oh, I want to make a system that talks to him and can totally be controlled by his voice, and he can play the whole game just by talking to it. And then when I was trying to consider what I would build it in, I looked at all the things that I needed, and Construct 3 had them all. Like it had text to speech, and it had speech recognition. I could read and write to databases. It just basically had everything that I thought I needed. I always think modularly when I'm making anything. I always think I need this part, this part, this part, this part, and this part, and then it had the answers to all of those parts. So then I started to build it. Basically, I started with its speech recognition software and its text-to-speech software, and then I started building a parsing engine based on Zork. Do you guys know what Zork is? Okay, Zork is this old text-based video game, and then so I built a parsing engine based on this parsing engine that they made in the 80s because it kind of worked like natural language processing, but it was made in the 80s. So it's kind of like a shortcut so that I could show in my MVP what I wanted to do with AI. And then, yeah, it really killed it. And then when I was done, I started showing it around to people. And when I started showing it around to people, one after another, people were like, Victor, you should patent this. And I was like, really? Because I made it in a game engine. And but one after another, people kept saying that it should be patented. And I was like, well, I'm just trying to make this game. And so I just did the very best I could with what I had. So one of the people that I showed it to, he worked at this billion-dollar media company. And the reason that I was showing it to him is because he was actually after me to make a comedy series for one of their media platforms. And then I was like, oh, I have this side thing that I've been working on. And then I showed it to him, and he was like, I'm going to take this to the top of the company, which he did. The only reason I'm not saying the name of the company is because we're recording this, but when we're not recording, I'll tell everybody who it is. But well, I don't think they've made a public announcement yet, but it's, just that telling you right now. I'll tell you later. Okay, so then, so when I was doing this, it was really funny because like I was doing this and these guys were like, patent, patent, patent. And I was like, really? And I got a provisional patent, and I worked with the patent lawyer and I got a provisional patent. And then this big company, they were like, we really want this thing. And I was talking to my business partner and CFO, his name is Ryan. And I was like, it seems like they want to buy this thing that I made with this game engine. And then he was just like, it's not going to happen. And I was like, I know. And then at one point I meet with all of their techs, and then they're like, hand us over your code. And I was like, well, I made it in this game engine. There's not really code. I can just show you the game engine and show you my file, and that's what I handed over to them. And they bought it anyway, which was amazing to me. I really thought that was going to be the end. I thought that was going to be the moment. Yeah, I didn't know what I was doing. It really doesn't require applause. I didn't know. All right, so they took it and they went through it, and they were like, "This really works." They were effusive. They said it was a brilliant solution. What it did that for accessibility that other things weren't doing is that it was very lightweight. It didn't require any sort of extra hardware. It also didn't require any heavy lifting from AI because there's a system built underneath it that made everything much easier for the AI, and so it was much faster. Basically, what the system does that a lot of systems don't do is, you know how like there's descriptive audio when you say if you have a movie and you're watching a movie and you're blind and there's descriptive audio telling what to happen. This basically does that with any visual software, and it does a running. It does a running. I'm trying to think of the word, but it progressively generates a running narrative of what's happening on the screen and does it in real time. Okay. Anyway, so that was great. Now, so I did do some testing of the software. This was before I had the patent. I actually went to an art fair because I'm an artist, and I went to an art fair and like set up this game that I was making with the software. And that was another time where someone was there from Microsoft, and they invited me to meet with them based on it before I knew what it was. 3 things that I found out that were really interesting. 1, the software makes things compatible for people that are blind, or people that are deaf to some extent, or people that are quadriplegic or have physical disabilities, but also people who are technophobic. It makes things easier for them to interact with because they can just talk to it. And that's what was the most positive thing about it. All right. Again, ChatGPT is like explain how you marketed and sold, but really it was just by accident. I was talking to this guy about something else and I showed it to him and he kind of flipped out about it. Once I did sell it to this company, then I'm sharing the use of the license with them. Strangely enough, the same prototype made in this no-code system was also enough for me to pitch for an SBIR grant, and so far I've made it all the way through every single stage to finally to the one-on-one meeting with the National Science Foundation, which just happened this Friday. They like it too. It seems very likely that I'm going to get a grant for this. I don't know for sure, but it's pretty crazy. I think that the whole idea is that I started out with this no code thing. I really thought that I could not achieve the level of what people were seeing, because when they initially saw it, they only saw the front end and they saw what it was doing and they thought it was great. And then when I had to hand over my code, I really thought that it was over, because I, like a lot of people, kind of like think in my head, oh, no code means like not as good as regular programming. I think that all the time. I know that Omar does because he codes all the time. I'm calling you out, man. I'm calling you out. But that's wrong. I think it's totally wrong.
I come to this event.
Yeah, and that was the main lesson that I learned from this experience. It was just that like being in a no-code environment did not hamper the ability of what I could build in that. And yeah, it is the idea that matters most. As long as they saw that what was coming through, they were still excited about it. So big thanks to ChatGPT for writing this. And if there are any questions, now's the time. Yes. Oh, Eric first, and then you. Go ahead.
You just tell us about the game? What's the premise? What are the?
Yeah, I wanted to build a game. I wanted to build a game that was basically like a reliable dungeon master. People have tried to make AI-generated dungeon games, but everything's kind of loosey-goosey. You know how like in the same way that AI image generation is having problems drawing hands still. AI narratives, often the wheels kind of fall off when you want to have details. And so I wanted to make something that solved that problem. And so I made I basically made an AI dungeon master that could keep track of all the details.
Oh, just, sorry, my English not very well, but I want to know how you monetization your game. You make game for sellers, or you publish it in something platform like Play Market and maybe HTML.
The game itself is still being made. So the interface for the game turned out to be this thing that sold first, and then that did sell. And then with the grant, I'm still developing the game, which is going to be like a first of its kind game that was meant for the blind, deaf, physically disabled, and people who are regularly abled. Because so far, as far as I can tell, there hasn't been a game that's supposed to hit everybody at once that can be playable by everyone. And that I'm going to be shopping to distributors. And yeah.
How did you find it?
Pardon?
The virus? How did you find it?
They found me because I was a comedian and they needed somebody funny to make material for one of their media platforms. And then while I was there, I showed them the thing that I was working on. And then they were,
hey, check this out.
well, yeah, because the guy who was working there was like a friend of mine. He's like, because he always calls me whenever he's on some sort of work. Like before he worked at this company, we were friends. And then so he called me because he was working on this thing. And he's like, we need funny shows. And I was like, oh, I can make a funny show. And then I said, oh, by the way, I'm working on this side thing. And he was just like, patent this. He said the same thing. So yeah. And that was it. Yes.
Is Construct 3 open source, or what's the licensing model?
Construct 3 is a paid model. Like it's basically the same as like like you can do so much for free, but if you want like free reign to make things as big as you want to, you have to pay a monthly fee. Although there is something very similar to it that is 100% open, which is G-Develop, I think it's called, and it's very similar to Construct 3, and it's online for free. In fact, I teach kids sometimes how to make games, and those are the two platforms that I go back and forth with. All right, guys, great talk.
Holy shit, that was awesome. Did not expect to hear all that from a comedian. That's awesome. Okay. I think that is it. Oh, that was the slide for him. Yeah, one last shout out for Glide for keeping this meetup alive for the foreseeable future, I think. And I think back to a story Erik told about like cool shit he's built the bubble. I think one story Ray from Glide, who shared in the last meetup, was, I think it's on their case studies page, some farmer in Denmark is using Glide to like run like these massive farms in Denmark, all from just like building a simple mobile app that all his other co-farmers can use. And so I think speaking back to what Erik was talking about, there is like this fun factor about using these tools that just can't be replaced, I think, and just makes these tools really fun to use sometimes. And it's like blending work and play a little bit. So just want,
I'm sorry.
yes.
I just want to, I realized I should have taken the opportunity to just talk about what I'm working on right now, just so people know about it.
Yeah.
Can I? Okay.
You want to stand up or?
It's really quick.
Okay.
Two things. One, we have a site, which is a tournament gaming site, and all the games on the site have been made by Construct 2, with Construct 2, called High Score Wins Money. Every day we give away $100 to whoever gets the high score in the game. We're not giving away money right now because we're about to relaunch, but you can still play the games. There's a game that I made called Break Invaders, which is half Space Invaders, have Breakout, which I like a lot. And then the other thing is we also have a site that we just released that's about to be launched on AppSumo, called magicbookifier.ai. And what that site does is it basically can take any sort of transcript, like if you have a transcript of your speaking or a speech or something like that, and with one click, it turns it into an ebook or narrative text. That's it. Cool.
You said the website's high score.
score wins money.
Highscorewinmoney.com.
Yep.
I assume. Okay. Highscorewinmoney.com is for the audio. But yeah, I just want to give another shout out to Glide for keeping us, supporting us and keeping the meetup alive. And yeah, thank you for coming.